Welcome back to another edition of the Week in Blog. Our regulars, Matt Lewis and Kristen Soltis, both gallivanting around the country. And so we have a great guest to carry the conservative flag for this week's edition, Alana Goodman. I apologize. Alana, why don't you tell the good folks about yourself?
Hi, Alana Goodman. I'm assistant editor at Commentary Magazine, and I'm very excited to be here.
And for folks who don't know me, Bill Scher with the Campaign for America's Future at ourfuture.org, and also podcasting at liberaloasis.com. So we're still there's still reverberations in Washington after the president's press conference on Wednesday. It seems like conservatives are not appreciative of Obama's emphasis on Republicans coming to the table and offering compromise on taxes. I see that from Republican politicians. I assume conservative bloggers are not accepting the president's constructive advice all that well.
Yeah, I mean, basically what I've been hearing in the conservative blogosphere has been a lot of fact-checking on what the president was saying. There was actually an excellent Daily Caller piece by Jonathan Strong this morning talking about, basically different factual errors that the president made during the press conference. One of them was talking about how there's literally nobody outside of who's not a politician who thinks that we can just cut spending in order to get through the deficit, and when in fact Ben Bernanke has said that we could fix the deficit by just cutting spending. So that was a big thing from Strong's piece. Also, there were I think the president he hit on private jets a lot. He hit on that I think 6 times during the press conference. And how we can we can put more taxes on these private jets, and actually that was cut taxes on the private jets, and that was actually in the stimulus that Obama proposed. So there were a couple things like that I've been seeing around.
So interesting that the impulse was to go the fact check route, and without us doing a back and forth on the fact checking. That tends to be the kind of thing that I see a lot of folks on the left do with conservatives, and always trying to say, if you just look at my facts, then all will be good in the world. And that has never really worked very well for the left. Is there any concern on the right that Obama has, seized the bully pulpit well and put Republicans on the spot to say, hey, Democrats are compromising on X, Y, and Z, and the only people who aren't are Republicans. Polling shows that there's plenty of appetite to raise taxes on the wealthy on various fronts. Is there any concern that Obama's got them a little bit in a corner right now?
I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I mean, I think that the whole idea of blaming the Republicans for this is polling has shown. I think there was a Stanley Greenberg, I believe during an interview at Time Magazine recently, talked about how that actually is a poor strategy for the president. He's done polling on that, and he's done research talking to people about that, and that's not really something that focus groups are willing to look upon favorably. So I think that just kind of pushing off blame is not really something that is helpful with voters.
Well, now on the left side of the ledger, obviously general support for the rhetoric that the president was using. This is the type of thing that the left is usually demanding Obama do more of, calling people out and not always soft pedaling in the hopes of bipartisan compromise. And certainly you saw, the Huffington Post headline was very much in sync with the president's messaging, and the Huffington Post is not always, if not often, in sync with the president's messaging. And bloggers like Jonathan Chait at the New Republic thought it was very politically wise, saying that the truth is that none of Obama's proposals would have more than a marginal boost for growth. That makes them better than the Republican proposals, which would worsen the economy. But he needs a theme, and castigating Republicans for failing to act on his moderate pro-business agenda seems like a useful way to combine both Clintonian and Trumanite do-nothing Congress themes. So he's getting some political support there as far as a strategy from Jonathan Chait. Daily Kos's Jed Lewison also echoing what the president said. Obama challenges Republicans' deficit deal must end millionaire and billionaire tax breaks. But you also have folks on the left who are not sympathetic to Obama, very concerned that he is embracing too much of an austerity agenda and not putting enough emphasis on raising taxes on the wealthy. Roy Baum, Mike Conzel, said, I think it's crazy that we're even talking about cutting the deficit at all with unemployment so high and inflation and borrowing costs so low. And he headlines his post, Republicans reject the Republican offer for a deficit cutting mix, or Democrats propose the American Enterprise Institute plan on tax increases versus spending cuts. Talking about the ratio that Obama and Democrats are talking about generally is 17% tax increases and 83% spending cuts.
I don't think that the president is ever going to be able to kind of make that segment of the community happy in terms of what he's able to do. So I think that, but in terms of criticizing Republicans for, failing to act, I think that might have worked, except for the fact that he, today with McConnell trying to meet with him, that was definitely an issue. Turning down that invitation, I've seen a lot of that criticism over that online. So
we'll see. I mean, I find that the Republican attempts to say that Obama is sort of slacking on the job or in over his head or whatever, they've always seemed to have fallen flat. Like, yes, he goes on, he does golf on the weekends. Yes, he has political fundraisers, but none of those things are all that unusual. And it would be different if the rest of the presidency was sort of this lackadaisical lollygagging. But I think for most people, it's a fairly active presidency, whether you like it or not like it. Things do happen. So I think it's harder to make it stick that somehow he's just out to lunch here and not even trying.
Well, I mean, I think that was kind of the attack that he took with Republicans, saying that they were out to lunch on this, or that Congress was leaving Washington. They need to stay in town and kind of get through this. So I guess I would
specific because there are recesses. There were recesses scheduled.
Yeah,
well, I think they've now been suspended.
Well, I think that McConnell, and I know that his invitation was called a political stunt by Democratic leadership in the Senate, but I think that I think that was kind of a smart move to give Obama that invitation, and now Obama's the one who's turning it down and is out of town to go to Philadelphia for two fundraisers instead. So that's been a common attack that I've seen in the blogosphere.
I'm sorry, say that last part again.
So that's been a common theme that conservatives have been hitting on in the blogs.
I imagine in relatively short order, the president and McConnell will have a conversation again. Maybe a little bit.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I think Harry Reid extended another invitation for next week, so we'll see if the president accepts that. But yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that
the bigger question is not whether or not they're going to meet. I think it's completely impossible. There'll be no conversations between now and the August 2nd deadline. But has anything changed in the political dynamic because of the president's press conference that might make Republicans more conducive to any kind of revenue-raising proposals? And there was a bit of a presumption going into this that both Boehner and McConnell's comments never ruled out raising revenue. They talk about not increasing tax rates, but there was enough wiggle room there that if they were going to close loopholes or end deductions, that Boehner McConnell could accept that without contradicting past statements. I think that's still the case. But obviously that's not the perception, the overall tone of the rhetoric. So the question that becomes, has anything changed because of this press conference that is going to put pressure on Republicans to be a little more flexible on things like tax loopholes and deductions?
That's not really something that I've seen yet. So I guess that's up in the air. We'll see on that. But
right. It's certainly there's nothing that they've publicly said that would indicate they're moving off the dime. Well, aside from what's going on in the debt limit world, lots of activity in the Republican presidential race. We're still, I'd still say it's Michele Bachmann's week, although maybe that will change once the fundraising numbers come in. Mitt Romney is seen as raking in a big haul. But it seems like on the conservative side, there was a lot of ire pointed at Fox News' Chris Wallace for saying to Michele Bachmann point blank that some people think she's a flake.
Yeah.
And were conservative bloggers rallying around Bachmann after that, or were they rallying around Fox for proving it is somehow an actual journalistic organization?
I think there was a divide there. I think mostly there was criticism of Wallace, and I think we saw that in terms of how he had to step back his comments on that afterwards and apologize for them. But there was also, a sense that from other bloggers saying that he didn't really have to apologize. I mean, I read that at commentary. I didn't think that an apology was really necessary in that instance because, I mean, he's doing his job. He's asking tough questions. I thought that there were two really good reasons for him to ask that. One was that it kind of gives her a chance to respond to this criticism that is constantly being lobbed at her from the left. And two, it shows how she responds under pressure. And that's a tough question. I mean, it's hard to, I don't know how I would respond to that. I don't know. How about you?
Well, I mean, my question in general is Chris Wallace applying a consistent standard to the people that he interviews? There's probably a lot of other people in that seat you could probably call a flake that he may not put that question point blank to them. I think the link you share with me, Charles Krauthammer was raising that question. Why aren't you calling Ron Paul a flake? He's got plenty of flaky positions.
Or I mean, even why not is Mitt Romney a phony or
Right. I mean, it's a very personal type of question as opposed to being a policy-based question.
Absolutely. But I think
if that's your interviewing style across the board, fine. If you're singling out Michele Bachmann, is it because she's a woman and you're treating a woman candidate differently than a male candidate? That would be a legitimate question. I got the sense from the responses to that Wallace had apologized, and the apology I thought was weird too.
The apology was very weird. I agree, and it was also kind of after the whole Jon Stewart stuff where he had commented on another one of his interviews. So this is kind of becoming a regular thing, which is interesting.
Right. So I mean, the dynamic is going to be Fox News viewers said to Chris Wallace, "Stop being mean to Michele Bachmann," which is really not if that's what was being said. That's my interpretation. That's not really a proper criticism. And then Chris Wallace then come out and say, I'm really sorry I upset you. I thought Michele Bachmann's answer was really strong. What journalist says that?
I thought it was a great answer. And I thought it showed a lot of poise on her part. And so...
I think it's fair to say that she gave a strong answer. I think it's weird for Chris Wallace to say that. He's the journalist. He shouldn't be judging the quality of her answers.
Yeah. No, I thought it was a little weird. And I think it does kind of raise questions for journalists. It's like if somebody takes your question the wrong way, or if the public takes your question the wrong way, are you expected to apologize for it? I mean, I thought it was a legitimate question. And Krauthammer as well, he said that was a legitimate question that you could ask a legitimate candidate. So...
I guess a question I have is, to the extent that there was a split in the conservative blogosphere on this question, does that speak to a split in terms of what conservative bloggers think about Michele Bachmann, that some are excited that there's someone carrying the conservative flag finally who's generating some enthusiasm, who could maybe take out a relatively moderate Mitt Romney. Or there are other bloggers saying Michele Bachmann would be a complete train wreck, and we need Fox News to come down on her hard, or else she could actually run away with this thing.
I think there's definitely that split there, but I don't think that it came down along those lines in terms of the Wallace thing. I think that, it was kind of split between people who were saying, media bias and sexism, and the other side, which kind of said, calm down. It really, he didn't mean offense by it. So, but yeah, I mean, in terms of Bachmann, there's obviously the divide in terms of, is she a good candidate who people support? Yes, a lot of people agree with her principles, but can she win? And that's a question that's definitely been raised.
And that question's being asked. I mean, conservative bloggers are actually putting it out there.
Yep.
Can Michele Bachmann win?
I mean, is she able to win in a general election against Obama? So.
Right. I mean, certainly on the left, you didn't see too much about the Wallace thing on the left, but Michele Bachmann is one of those conservatives that liberals enjoy picking apart, and in part because she says they sort of designed to get under the skin of liberals. So you have Collie Gray at the Daily Post picking up on the NBC report that Michele Bachmann's clinic received a whole chunk of Medicaid funding, about $170,000 worth. You had the folks over at America Blog making fun of her embracing John Wayne as a fellow hometown boy, when it was really John Wayne Gacy that was from her hometown, not John Wayne. And Mother Jones's Tim Murphy did a whole compilation of Michele Bachmann's greatest hits. So,
I'm just curious. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm curious. Does the left-wing blogosphere actually believe that she thought that she was talking about John Wayne Gacy when she said this, or do they realize that this was, a simple misstatement?
I don't know if they necessarily, folks that do believe that. I just think folks that are enjoying making fun of her by any means possible. So even if it's an unfair hit, I think as Dave Weigel at Slate pointed out, John Wayne did come from nearby, is from Iowa, and so perhaps a small town of Waterloo might have embraced him for being nearby. I mean, I can tell you here in Northampton, Massachusetts, we often lay claim to Rachel Maddow, even though she actually doesn't live in Northampton. She lives in a town 40 minutes away, but she's nearby, so we say she's ours.
And she was on the radio in Northampton for a while,
wasn't
she? Or something like that. Like a local...
I'm not sure if she lived in Northampton proper. I mean, she was on the radio here at a Northampton-based station. She may have been, I know, but where she currently resides is not literally in Northampton. It's just in the vicinity. Mm-hmm. So, smaller towns do that sort of thing. So it's very plausible that's what Michele Bachmann was doing. But you're seeing on the left an exuberance in making fun of her whenever the opportunity arises, and not worrying about all the little details of what the circumstances might be.
Yeah, I mean...
And so this is the kind of thing where you ask a lot of conservatives about Sarah Palin, even if they're Palin fans, they might say, I know she can't win because, the media is going to be unfair to her, which I find kind of a cop-out reason. But it is stuff like this that I imagine makes conservatives feel that way, where it's sort of like a ticky-tack thing.
Well,
and
absolutely.
It's more
I mean, how much
thing, and liberal bloggers are really trying to fuel that fire.
How much coverage, was there of, Obama's gaffes that he's had recently? I mean, he's had a lot, especially that horrible one with the Medal of Honor winner. That was really terrible. And
I'm sorry, which one?
The Medal of Honor recipient recently.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
There was recently a kind of a controversy with the Medal of Honor recipient.
I don't even know about that.
Yeah, where he said that he had given it to the one living Medal of Honor recipient. He named the wrong person and got the names mixed up. It was...
I mean, there are a bunch of things like that where Obama has said something kind of silly. We misspeaks in a certain way, and I see conservatives all the time, try to blow them up, and sometimes even do like a string of them and show that this is an example of media unfairness and whatnot. And there's a case you can be made of the media standards here. The media often has unfair double standards. But I think the reason why those charges don't stick is that Obama does enough things over the course of the day to indicate that he's not a stupid person. So it's much easier to accept that people flub. You're in the spotlight a lot. Sometimes you're gonna make a little slip up. It doesn't mean that you actually are lacking in basic intelligence. Whereas folks like Dan Quayle, Sarah Palin, and Michele Bachmann say enough stupid things that are not counterbalanced by a lot of smarter things that it makes those things more resonant.
The stupid things are taken out of proportion. I mean, come on. Like, do you really think that mixing up, they're saying John Wayne and when it's really John Wayne? I mean, do you think that was a sign of a lack of intelligence? Or maybe just a lack of research, or a mix-up, an honest mistake.
No, I think that is simply a mix-up. I think that was just a flub, and probably not to get anything larger. I'm just saying it's easier to make hay with those things when there's a lot of other things that happened prior. It fits a frame. It fits a narrative, and so you end up. So the little things that are really irrelevant end up having more unfair resonance than with someone like Barack Obama, who doesn't have that built-in narrative that is somehow a bubble.
Yeah, and I think that is what concerns some people about Michele Bachmann. Not necessarily anything wrong with her, but in terms of how the media might, the media narrative and things like this that kind of feed into that narrative, and the problem with that in a general election.
I mean, the hope, I assume, the reason why the right started rallying around her was she seemed to not have a moment like that in the debate 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. She seemed to be on point. She wasn't. She didn't have crazy eyes. She looked at the camera properly. She hit her sound bites.
No,
felt a little better. Maybe she was going to be. She had her A game.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that I don't necessarily think that the right perceives her as somebody who's or a flake, as Chris Wallace said, or as he said. I think that definitely that narrative is more on the left and the mainstream media as well.
So shifting a little bit, there's been an extra kick of Michele Bachmann talk because she polled so well in the Des Moines Register poll a week ago, tied for first place with Mitt Romney. Really the only two you could say had front-runner status. There was a poll afterwards that had her in second place in New Hampshire, a distant second, but nevertheless showing her really the only one to have any kind of substantial support. And I think there was a national poll recently where she was polling in the top tier. How are conservatives looking at those poll numbers? Are they feeling reassured that some folks are rising to the top, someone's generating enthusiasm, or are people still saying, look, all these numbers are still kind of flat, everyone's still sort of in the 20s at best. There's still room for a Rick Perry or a Sarah Palin, and let's try to draw one of those folks in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously these are early polls, so there is certainly time for a Rick Perry or someone like that. But I think that this is definitely, giving her a lot of credibility. I think people see her as somebody who could become a front runner. And I think that, there's also a lot of, I guess it one thing that it kind of hurts is Pawlenty in all of this, because he was kind of being viewed as the alternative to Romney, and now that he's done pretty poorly in Iowa and the New Hampshire polls recently, that's definitely, you're seeing, I guess, more concern for the Pawlenty campaign.
I have a hard time understanding that. I feel like the mainstream media pundits pretty much take every development as bad for Pawlenty because Pawlenty's not doing well. But what voters out there were potential Pawlenty voters that are going to Bachmann. It seems that Bachmann takes out of Kane and Santorum and Gingrich, and the person taking Pawlenty's votes is Romney. It's not the more conservative votes taking out of Pawlenty. Pawlenty's got to find the votes of the more the calmer, relatively moderate pool of Republicans, such as they exist. And it's Bachmann who seems to be on the track of consolidating the conservative movement.
Well, that's true, but I think that people take a closer look at Bachmann now that she has been so successful in recent polls. So I think that it just makes people look more closely at her record and just pay more attention to her in general, and really actually consider her as a potential top-tier candidate. So.
Now Nate Silver had a post in his New York Times 538 blog, one saying, look, these are good numbers for Bachmann. There's no getting around that. She is clearly a legitimate contender to win the Republican nomination. And John Chait, the Republic, has said sort of similar things that some others in the media need to start accepting the fact that Bachmann could actually win and treat her that way. But Nate went deeper to say that this does not mean the end for Pawlenty. He certainly has problems, but he's saying he has upside in his numbers, and Romney has downside. So in Pawlenty's case, the dangers of the Republican team will choose to promote another prospect from the minors to take his place in the rotation. Someone is poised to be a Romney alternative from, the ex-governor camp, and it could be Pawlenty, it still could be Pawlenty, and he has to worry about the Republican establishment coming in and plucking Rick Perry and having him take that place and not him. But we still could do it, and I suppose that's technically true. It's just that you certainly haven't seen what there is in Pawlenty's arsenal that would give him a spark. He's given speech after speech. He's got a lot of ads. He's had a couple of debates.
Yeah, obviously, this isn't. Pawlenty still has plenty of time. He's fine. There's plenty of time for him in this, but in terms of, he has very high favorabilities in Iowa, which is a positive. But on the other hand, you look at that and you say, I think somebody wrote about this at Politico, Alexander Burns. Iowans like Pawlenty, they don't want him to be president, and that's a problem. You can't necessarily chalk his poor showing in the polls up to a lack of name recognition, because there were people with far less name recognition than him who were, Herman Cain did better in the poll than he did. And so I think that is a big problem. Pawlenty has put in a ton of time and effort in Iowa so far. He's had 20 visits recently, something like that, I've read. And he, in addition to that, he was the first candidate to put a TV ad there. And Iowa is really a central part of his campaign strategy. So, it's not good news for him. It's not the end by any means, but, he's going to...
But so he needs to do something different than what he's doing now. He can't just...
And the problem is, people like him, so he's not going to... his problem isn't that people don't like him or people don't know who he is. His problem is that they like him, but... they're not. Maybe they don't think he's presidential material. I don't know what the reasoning is, but.
There seems to be no overarching argument for his candidacy except that I could win. And the tough thing with candidacy is premised on that is that if you don't have the poll numbers to show you can win, you don't have much of an argument. And therefore, if you don't have them inherently, and Pawlenty certainly does not, you have to do something to get headlines, to stoke enthusiasm, and whether that is red meat to the base, or that is leading a charge against elements in your party, the way Howard Dean did in 2004, or McCain did in 2000. Again, they didn't win, but they certainly got attention to themselves and elevated their statures. You got to do something. You got to pick a fight with somebody. You have to have a signature idea, and he has yet to really do that. So now there is a premise in presidential primaries, which, and I forget who coined the phrase, but the way to win is to organize, and get hot at the end. Now, you can certainly argue that Pawlenty is doing a hell of a lot of organizing in Iowa, and perhaps that's good enough if he has something in mind to get hot at the end with, and I just don't know if he has that.
Yeah, and as Nate Silver wrote, I mean, the big problem is if somebody like, the establishment who's not for Romney rallies around someone like Perry. So if he does end up entering the race.
And that speaks to, is Romney really in a firm front runner position, or is he right to be picked off either by a newcomer or by Bachmann? Jed Lewison at Daily Coast asked, is there a Mitt Romney ceiling? Looking at that Des Moines Register poll, saying yes, he's tied for first. Yes, he's more well known than his rivals, but he's not doing well in people's second choice, to show that sport's not very, very deep, and 44% of likely Iowa caucus goers say they have supporting an individual mandate for health insurance is a deal killer for them. It's a pretty significant, and 25% they'd have to consider it. It's a pretty significant chunk of voters, even though it's not quite 50%.
Yeah, I mean,
but it certainly cuts off a lot of avenues to build on what you have.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't give much weight to that, I guess, just because Iowa is not really, the center of Romney's strategy. So, I mean, he's much more focused on New Hampshire, and, he doesn't need to win in the primary there, so.
Well, I guess that's the question. To what extent is that individual mandate a problem in other states? It doesn't seem to be a problem in New Hampshire, where he essentially lives a lot of the time now, and was governor of a neighboring state, so he's got familiarity there. And he's got familiarity in Nevada, as Politico reported, largely because of the strong woman population there. But in other states, if someone really takes it to him an individual mandate, and Pawlenty flinched from doing that in the last debate, but certainly would seem that someone still could. Would that really limit how much more he can grow from essentially the mid-20s position that he is right now? And it would seem that you need at least, and that's what this other shows, 35% to win in an early primary contest when you have a fractured field. And I assume Mitt Romney could do that if he really consolidates the moderate share of the primary vote. But someone else on the conservative side could too, Bachmann or Perry, be the most likely people. And someone could take a chunk out of where Romney is by really hitting hard on individual mandate.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat that? Did you ask me a question there?
That's all I have to say about it.
I don't know if you were asking me something about that. But no, I mean, yeah, I think that, the takeaway from the poll was that, Romney did well. Bachmann kind of surprised people by how well that she did. And Pawlenty, not good news for him. And I think that he needs to beat somebody who's a top-tier candidate in Iowa in order to really be in play, I think.
Outside of presidential primary politics, the other big news of the week was the New York State decision to legalize equal rights for marriage, extending to gays and lesbians. And I don't know if this got a lot of attention on the right. So on the left, a very big deal, and a bit of a division in how to look at this in terms of its effect on Obama, who is walking a bit of a tightrope on the whole issue. You had certain folks who are crediting Obama's approach to this as setting the stage for these developments, even though he's not, quite leading the parade. And probably most prominent of this is Andrew Sullivan, who has a bit of a love-hate relationship with the president these days, but was very supportive of him taking kind of a low-key role and, advancing equal rights measures short of marriage on the federal level,
Yeah.
but hanging back on the state debates on the argument that which she actually cited a post from a reader saying, please name me one Republican who wants to be known as someone who takes orders from Barack Hussein Obama.
And that is a good.
If
That is
Obama
a good
said
point.
New York should pass
That
the,
is definitely, and that
Sorry.
is a good point. I mean, there definitely are the political implications of that, or Republican coming out and taking the side after that. I know that Maggie Gallagher had that piece in the Wall Street Journal today where she was talking about how there are going to be repercussions for the people for the legislators in New York who supported this.
right. So, Obama, and this is sort of akin to Obama's approach to a lot of issues, where he doesn't use the bully pulpit. He doesn't insert himself too forcefully on the public stage. I mean, there wasn't a big don't ask, don't tell speech. There's just quiet negotiation in the background and sort of trying to defuse it politically as opposed to making it more polarizing. And you can say it doesn't work all the time, but it works sometimes. But you also have folks who are basically still maligning him that he's behind the curve on this. America Blog has started a whole Evolve Already campaign with a Twitter hashtag and a T-shirt because referring to Obama's comments that he's evolving on the issue, which sort of most leftists don't really buy. That it's sort of part of where it sticks to people's cries.
I think there's, a strong sense of where he actually does stand on the issue, which, he probably is supportive of gay marriage. I think that, his whole thing about evolving kind of was evidence of that. So, I assume he's eventually going to come out for it, but, on the right, at least, there have been a lot of people saying, that his, his evolving comment and other things that he said recently show that he is kind of inching in that direction. So,
Right.
he's not going to.
And so the fact that people presume he's going to get there eventually, but isn't doing it now, rubs some people the wrong way.
Rubbing people on both sides the wrong way with it. There's people on the left attacking him and people on the right attacking him for the same, for reading different things into what he's saying,
Right. Now, what I think is actually most notable about this were the comments from Rachel Maddow right after the New York State Legislature passed the bill, where she said Obama is against what just happened. And that sparked a certain Twitter backlash with folks, saying things like, why did you lie to Rachel Maddow? And this is a development that I don't know if people really understand well. If you're not familiar with all the nuances of the liberal blogosphere, see why you would. But a lot of liberal bloggers, the most prominent ones, are not big Obama fans. Never were big Obama fans, and always been very critical of his please the centrism and bipartisanship. And in the past few months, you're seeing a Twitter community form that is very pro-Obama and will go after folks like Glenn Greenwald and Jane Hampshire on these questions.
That's interesting.
And this is the first time they went after a non-blogger, Rachel Maddow, someone who is almost universally respected and idolized on the left.
Are you talking about, in terms of the Twitter community,
Salon,
are these bloggers who are involved in this, or is it?
What's interesting about it is that they're mainly not bloggers. Some of them have blogs, but I wouldn't say that their blogging gets a lot of attention. And it's what they're doing on Twitter that kicks up the most dust. And this is the first time that's gotten a certain amount of media coverage, and that Salon did a piece about these folks going after Rachel
And these people
Maddow,
have been
and
popping
sort of
up
has
more
a
and more lately?
feeling
Or these people have
I'm
been
sorry?
popping up more and more lately, you're saying?
I think so. I think there's more of them. They communicate with each other. There's a sense of community. You're starting to see inside jokes. I follow some of these people. I don't get the jokes they're making all the time. And that sort of thing was happening in the very early days of the liberal blogosphere back in 2002. It was a relatively small group of people. And they're sort of making their own inside jokes and making their own nicknames for people and terms for things. And that fosters a sense of community that ended up having more of an impact beyond just being a mere echo chamber. And so you're seeing a seed of that happening right now for Obama defenders, almost solely within the Twitter community. And I'll be curious to see if this grows into something larger. But you haven't seen a lot of online fervent backing of the president, even though he polls very well amongst liberals generally. The online world's mostly been critical of Obama from the left, and this is the first signs I've seen of something different.
Interesting. So do you think this is just popping up because the campaign is getting underway, or what do you think kind of started this?
I don't know if it's campaign related. I think it might be similar to why there was a burst of liberal blogging in 2002. There was this sort of frustration point in the days where George Bush was being completely lauded by all media types, and that seemed to be extending into the online world with the rise of Instapundit. Once Instapundit started getting more explicitly political, that kind of was the last straw for some folks, because before you've been seen as more of a nonpartisan figure, and then folks just sort of flocked in and saying, "I'm sick of this. I'm gonna claim my internet piece of turf, and I'm going to say what I got to say." And I sense that there's a certain frustration with the more pro-Obama diehards of a tiredness with a lot of the criticism that Obama gets online, Huffington Post, Salon, etc. And now they're trying to make some noise on the president's behalf, it seems.
Interesting. Okay, well, bringing it back to the gay marriage stuff, there was David Frum had a good piece, I think it was at CNN.com, talking about how he has actually shifted on same-sex marriage, or he's saying he was wrong on same-sex marriage when he opposed it, and he kind of came to, I guess, the critical point of his realization after New York, what happened in New York, because he said that it didn't bother him. And so he kind of, what he did in his piece, which I found very interesting, was that he didn't really make the emotional argument in favor of, or for why he changed his mind on this issue. He made more of, this was the outcome that I was saying and other people were saying was going to come from gay marriage. These are the negative fallout. This is the negative fallout that was going to happen. And none of this has ended up happening, and so I was wrong. And I found that very interesting. There was also a response to that I also thought was very good. James Andel at the American Spectator responded to Frum's piece, and he actually made an argument that I thought was really insightful, and I haven't heard anybody make before, which was that he disagrees with same-sex marriage, but he also feels that he's on the losing side, and that people who are on the right who are opposed to same-sex marriage are going to be looked at, down the road as, segregationists, or people who are against interracial marriage, that type of thing. And so he's saying, it's kind of tough to take this position just because we feel like we're going to be on the wrong side of history on this, and I thought that was really interesting.
It seems like this whole issue is the conservative movement struggling with this issue. CPAC had their issues with this most recently, where they had a gay group be part of be a sponsor organization, and some groups wanted to boycott CPAC after that. And, John Huntsman seems to be trying to stake a claim here of being sort of the gay-friendly Republican candidate, although I don't think he made any comments after the New York decision. But does it seem to you, my sense of it was that perhaps there is a younger conservative constituency that is not fearful of gays, does not think there is an insidious gay agenda, grew up with open gays, doesn't see this as a big deal, sees this as a very straightforward matter of equality. Is there room for a conservative candidate to embrace that and have more generational support than maybe you might think a conservative would have when you hear the more typical harangues from the Tony Perkinses and the Alan Hughes of the
Yeah,
world.
I mean, I don't see this as being a major issue in 2012. So I don't necessarily, I think that conservatives are probably going to try to avoid it, and I think that Obama's probably going to try to avoid it as well. I can't see them making it an
Although avoidance is a pretty big shift from 5 years ago for conservatives.
Well, I mean, everything's kind of focused on the economy right now. So I don't really see this as having, I don't think it would have a big impact on the election. But I think that you are right in terms of what this phenomenon you're pointing out, which is that young conservatives really are moving towards like the libertarian side of the gay marriage issue. You know, kind of what somebody wants to do, let them do that type of argument. And I think that's definitely a change from the social conservatives of, like even 15 years ago, 20 years ago, So.
Well, perhaps we should leave it on that note. Well, Alana, it's been great to talk to you. Tell folks again where they can find your work.
At commentarymagazine.com. And it was great talking to you, too. All right. Take care.
And Bill Scher from ourfuture.org and liberalvoices.com. This has been the Week in Blog here at blogheads.tv. And we'll see you next week on This Week in Blog. Take care.